The Los Angeles Chargers have now completed 3 interviews for their all-important offensive coordinator position. As of January 25th, Rams pass game coordinator Zac Robinson has completed his interview. Rams senior offensive assistant Greg Olson, who's more of the veteran presence, and also Vikings assistant QB coach Jerrod Johnson all have been completed, with Thomas Brown, Rams tight end coach and assistant head coach, on the horizon, as well as a request for Buffalo Bills QB coach Joe Brady, which has yet to be scheduled. But I want to talk to you about 5 offensive minds and coaches that are not being talked about as much around Chargers circles for a number of reasons. 1, some of those coaches are still in the playoffs and will ultimately, I believe, get interviews once they either win the Super Bowl or are out of the playoffs. Or 2, maybe just haven't yet come out as interview requests for the Chargers. So, with that, let's get into it. All right. Right off the bat, I'm going to talk about someone that is in the playoffs currently, playing up north in the Bay for the San Francisco 49ers. It seems like every year, anyone in Sean McVay's tree, which obviously the Chargers have already interviewed 2 and have 1 more on the way, and in Kyle Shanahan's tree, seems to be a hot name and a hot ticket. This year is no different, with the success that the Niners have had and the success that Miami had under Mike McDaniel, who is of that lineage. And it's a guy by the name of Bobby Slowik. He is the current pass game coordinator, which was the title held by Mike McDaniel and Mike LaFleur last season with the Niners, and a guy that has obviously now seen 3 different quarterbacks over his tenure with them. Only 35 years old, but has been 10 years in the league, dating back to his time with Shanahan in Washington. So the experience is there, not necessarily as a play caller, considering Shanahan does call plays, but he comes from that lineage and has that offensive mind that we all, I think, want to see Justin Herbert get to, operate in down here in Los Angeles, and hopefully he can take grasp of that. So the experience is there, not that quite there yet with the play calling ability, but I think the tree and the lineage that he comes from could bode very well for Herbert and this offense. Another name I haven't heard, Clint Kubiak. Now, he hasn't had a ton of success necessarily, but is still young, 35 years old, comes from that Gary Kubiak, Mike Shanahan tree and lineage, so a lot of those same concepts that we'd love to see run here in Los Angeles, and does have play calling pedigree and experience, which I think is something that a lot of these guys we're seeing don't have yet. He was the offensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings just 2 years ago under Mike Zimmer. Obviously that staff, or Mike Zimmer, was let go, and the new staff moved on. And then with the Broncos this past year, although the offense was a dumpster fire, he was the passing game coordinator and did take over play calling for a stint from their head coach, and we saw an uptick in offensive production to an extent once he took over. So still a name I'd like to see them interview. Never know what can come of that, and we'll see if he can kind of add some of that, again, that coaching concepts, the schemes, and that ilk from Gary Kubiak, Mike Shanahan, but also bring a little bit more experience to this Chargers and be able to kind of groom Justin Herbert more in the system that we want to see. One name that probably is also very hot, but just happens to still be in the playoffs, is Eagles QB coach Brian Johnson. To be honest, there's a lot of guys on the Eagles staff that I would love to see the Chargers interview. Johnson being first, which I'll get into a little bit more, but their pass game coordinator, Coach Patillo, and also Jeff Stoutland is their offensive line coach and run game coordinator. Obviously a lot more seasoned, but one of the great offensive line coaches in the game. So I'd love to see him at least get an interview and see what he can bring in that regard. But let's talk about Brian Johnson, who has been with this staff now since Sirianni was hired. So this is year 2 for him. Doesn't obviously call the plays, but comes from this system. He was with Sirianni in Indianapolis, so comes from that Frank Reich hierarchy as well. But before that, was in Florida as the offensive coordinator, calling plays for the Florida Gators, which led the most prolific passing offense in all of college football, the 7th total offense, and the 8th scoring offense down there in the SEC. So he's called plays. He has the pedigree. He's run a successful offense in college. Now he's gotten the NFL experience with the Colts and now with the Eagles, who are the favorite right now probably to win the Super Bowl. And it's all to do with what they've done with that offense and how they've transformed Jalen Hurts into a great NFL quarterback. So that's one I would love to see. One of my top candidates but is probably impossible to happen, but I'll talk about it anyway, and that's Frank Smith. He's the current OC with the Miami Dolphins, and the reason why it's probably impossible is because the Dolphins will just block it. I mean, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for them to allow him to make a lateral move, come back to LA and be the OC, but we've seen it happen before. With the Rams a few years prior, Matt LaFleur was the offensive coordinator under Sean McVay, but he didn't call plays. Tennessee requested to interview him to give him their OC job where he would run the offense under Mike Vrabel and call plays. Sean McVay and the Rams allowed it. Matt LaFleur went there, coached a year. Now, obviously, we know he's the coach of the Green Bay Packers. So, it can happen. It's a little more difficult considering they're both in the AFC. Obviously, they have the QBs that were drafted one after another in the same draft class. But you never know, because Mike McDaniel obviously is going to probably call plays as long as he's the head coach there in Miami, and it would give Frank Smith the opportunity to call plays, and we know what he did in LA. For those that don't remember, he was the offensive line coach and the run game coordinator just last year under Brandon Staley, and we've seen definitely a significant drop-off in the run game since he left, and arguably even a drop-off in offensive line play. Obviously, there were injuries this year, but last year we saw that huge improvement at the offensive line. We saw the run game succeed fairly well, even with Austin Ekeler being injured throughout the season, so would love to see Frank Smith back in LA if possible. Plus, we had him on the LA Football Show, so he's a friend of the show, friend of the network. We'd love to get him back. Final name that I'll put out there, and it's one that not sure how fans would feel about it, but Pep Hamilton. Pep Hamilton was the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans last year. We know they did not have a great offense, but they also did not have a lot to work with in terms of playmakers. They did have a great run game with the rookie down there. Didn't have great quarterback play, which is very hard to run an offense without great quarterback play, or at least subpar quarterback play. But we know Pep from when Anthony Lynn was here and Justin Herbert was the rookie for your Chargers, and Shane Steichen was the offensive coordinator. And we did see some fun things with the offense. I think Pep did a phenomenal job in developing Justin, getting him comfortable, getting him prepared, getting him ready. He's been around the league a long time. He's called plays in the NFL and in college, so the experience is there. The question is, would he even want to come back to LA after, getting technically dismissed? I know it was Anthony Lynn. I think he would, because why would you not want to come back and coach with Justin Herbert? The big question is, does Brandon Staley want him, considering he had the option when he was hired to retain Pep Hamilton and did not? But I think it's worth an interview, worth picking his brain to seeing what he would do. So, those are the 5 OC candidates that I have not seen talked about a lot for your Los Angeles Chargers. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and hopefully we can have this OC conundrum, or this coaching conundrum, wrapped up here soon. I'm Ryan Dyrud. Make sure to check out the LA Football Show for everything you need regarding your LA football teams. Talk to y'all soon.